When I got my first corporate job for an automotive aftermarket manufacturer called NGK Spark Plugs, I got my first chance to attend the Sema show in Las Vegas. I was very excited about that. That was way back in 1991, and it was like Disneyland for car lovers. Cool companies, cool parts, and amazing cars. I had never seen anything like it before. I attended the Sema show for about the next 16 years, along with other shows like PRI and Apex, to name a few. But the Sema show was always the king of all shows. This is the one that you had to be. It was like the Super Bowl of car shows. But it seems now that a little bit of the luster is starting to wear off, as General Motors this week said that they were pulling out of this year's Sema show, joining Ford and Honda by stepping away from this important show. So what's going on? Well, I started to dig into it, and we're going to get into that right after the break. This episode is made possible by Omaze. Omaze, you know Omaze. Omaze gives anyone the chance to win some amazing prizes, all while supporting worthy causes. To date, in fact, Omaze has raised over $150 million for worthy causes. Over the years, they've given viewers the chance to win houses, dream vacations, and some amazing cars. Cars that anyone would be thrilled to win. Cars that people dream of owning their whole life. So I'm pleased to announce that Omaze has another sweepstakes going on right now. So they asked me to share the good news. This is going to be right up your alley, I promise. So what is the prize for the sweepstakes? A 2022 McLaren GT. Oh, be still my heart. A supercar by any measure. A car that rockets from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and has a top speed of about 203 miles per hour, all courtesy of a V8 engine that makes about 612 horsepower. Approximate retail value on this bad boy? Oh, just a cool $240,000 and change. Taxes and shipping will be taken care of for you so long as you are a U.S. resident, so you won't have to sell the car to pay the taxes, which is an added bonus. You've heard me talking about being happy with my R35 GTR, but if I ever want a car like this, you could bet that I'd be taking it to the track on a Saturday morning and then taking my lady to a fancy restaurant on Saturday night. You know the type of restaurant, the one where the really cool cars get parked in front. Somehow my GTR number winds up there. So for your chance to enter to win a 2022 McLaren GT, go to omaze.com/Lieberman, Lieberman, and do it now. The donations support the amazing work of Make-A-Wish. The Make-A-Wish Foundation, if you didn't know, creates life-changing wishes for kids with critical illnesses. Not only can these wishes help children build the physical and emotional strength that they need to fight a critical illness, with Make-A-Wish, a wish is granted every 34 minutes. One of my favorite charities. Sema actually started way back in 1967, and it was originally referred to as the Speed Equipment Manufacturing Association. But because of concern about government regulations and the overall image of the group, the name was changed to vaguely reflect specialty parts instead, and that's why the name has changed. The first event was actually held in the basement of Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, where 3,000 people attended, a far cry from the 100,000 today. In 1974, the event was moved to a bigger venue at Anaheim Stadium to accommodate more attendees, and not long after, it made its way to the Anaheim Convention Center across from Disneyland. It was growing very fast, very, very fast. The show was very, very different back then. In the early days, manufacturers had little tiny booths, and they were there for one purpose: to meet with and sell to their warehouse distributor customers. The warehouse distributors were drawn to the show by the special discounts that were offered to them by the manufacturers. It was basically a sale. Car parts manufacturers who had booths at the show had order forms right in their booths, and the WD customers would come in and place an order right there. I'll take 500, I'll take 5,000, I'll take 50,000. I'll get this price, blah, 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 and that's the way it worked. So they were getting stuff at deep discounts. These discounts were offered only once a year and only at the Sema show. For the manufacturers who had booths, they could simply measure their return on their investment at the end of the show by counting up the value of the orders and comparing it to how much they spend there. Those are the good old days. A move to Las Vegas occurred in 1977 after organizers had to turn down manufacturers in the previous year due to a lack of space. It was still growing. But the move to Sin City also allowed for more predictable weather conditions, and that was something that everybody liked. Over time, of course, Sema became known for catering to industry experts rather than everyday consumers, and was considered a place where business was managed. This was a time when booths were filled with pretty girls in slinky clothing. This was effective at bringing in pretty much lecherous buyers from auto parts companies who always had an excuse to not place an order right then. It's kind of a dark side for the Sema show back then. And the other drawback back then was that manufacturers started getting so many people coming into their booths asking for sponsorship that it really got to be a giant time suck. I had one kid come into our NGK booth and said, hey man, I'd like to get a sponsorship for my snowmobile drag racing team. Snowmobile drag racing, is that a thing? I said, okay, where do you live? He said, well, I live in South Florida. Pardon me, does it snow in South Florida? I'm pretty sure. Hey man, I got the biggest snowmobile drag racing team in all of South Florida, to which I said, I have no doubt about that. Send me a proposal to my email address and I'll take a look at it. That's the kind of stuff that just sucks your time. I wonder if that's still going on today. By the early 2000s, the pretty girls were still there, but were dressed pretty much more conservatively. But I have to imagine that this period of the early 2000s had to be the peak of the Sema show so far. However, although it was a professional event, entertainment has always been a major part of Sema. Back in the days, while the Doris Herbert Drag News Party was a must-attend event, it was like the Golden Globes, that's the way it was for some time, the Sema Awards banquet became the place to be due to the fact that they would always book big-name musical acts. The show that was originally founded upon the need for manufacturers to sell parts had turned into a manhood swinging contest. After parties thrown by companies like Toyo Tires and Scion probably broke up more than a few marriages. That's all I'm gonna say. By that time, we're talking early to mid 2000s, everybody was swinging for the fences. The cars were better, they were over the top. There were more sports cars at the shows and more off-road stuff. Mall crawlers had become popular, and the industry was now more diverse than ever before. The Fast and Furious movies had come out just a few years earlier. It forced Sema to start taking the tuner industry seriously. There were so many TV shows around that time that made celebrities of car builders like Chip Foose and so many other people. This was the heyday, and I'm sticking to that story. Every company, if they were there for no other reason, they were there to outshine their competitors or just because their competitors there. During my tenure at NGK, I was tasked at designing our booth with that exact mandate. We want to upstage our competitors. Years later, while I worked for iBox Springs, I had the same mandate, and again when I was global marketing director for MagnaFlow. The booth my team and I designed for the MagnaFlow still stands pretty much as it did nearly 20 years ago. That's how important it is. If you get it right, they stick with it. But over the years, I saw the cost grow to unsustainable levels for a lot of companies. The Vegas Convention Center is run by unions. The regulations are almost draconian. So much so that Vladimir Putin would be blushing, and the fees feel like extortion. They range from $95 to $161 an hour. And don't even think about touching any of your stuff or setting anything up, but it has to be done by a union member. So when you see those giant booths at Sema, try to understand that the cost to have a booth like that and to have people travel and man that booth for 4 or 5 days can easily top $500,000. Some companies budget over $1 million for their booth, the supporting services, travel for their people, hotels for employees, food, signage, design, and whatever advertising packages they buy from Sema. Is it really worth it? Especially when most exhibitors aren't writing orders at the Sema show. The show has pretty much now become a 4-day meet and greet topped off with fancy dinners after each day, and for some, of course, followed by a trip to a local strip club. There's still a little bit of that going on. In all honesty though, more business is probably done at these after event dinners than on the show floor, but there's definitely value in networking and meeting your customers face to face at least once a year, and Sema is the perfect place to do that. Building relationships is one of the best things about the Sema show. That will never go away. You can't do that through the internet. You have to do that in person. Since the 1990s, Sema has had pretty good management and leadership, but by the 2000s, Sema seemed hell-bent on making money from every square inch of space in the convention center, the parking lot, even in the bathrooms. You want to hang a banner 40 feet in the air above the aisles? You could buy an advertising package. If you want to rent the billboard across the street from the Sema show in someone else's parking lot, Sema had an advertising package for that too. They secured the rights to sell it. So anyway, want to put your logo on a urinal cake in the men's bathroom? Sema probably had an advertising package for that too. Thanks, Joe Sabrigandio. Sema, however, has been very, very proactive in trying to give manufacturers value for their money. They've developed support systems for helping manufacturers capture leads at these shows. They've set up measuring sessions for new cars and many other things and initiatives, all in the name of fostering growth in the industry. For that, Sema definitely deserves accolades. And while buyers still go to the Sema show in pretty decent numbers, a lot of them are just misusing their badge and they're just looky-loos who go to the show because they're into cars. And maybe they pop into a couple of manufacturers and have a discussion with them, but it's not what it was. In my personal experience over 16 years, it seems that less business was being done each year, at least the kind of business that your marketing director can point to and say, this deal only happened because of our presence at the Sema show. Manufacturers like Ford and GM have had huge booths as far back as I can remember and still do today, and they dominated the show in the early 2000s. Others like Honda and Toyota started upping their game too, and they started building their presence as well. Then came the pandemic. In 2020, SEMA canceled the show, and for a while, the 2021 SEMA show was touch and go. And finally, in May of 2021, the announcement was made that SEMA would indeed let the show go on. But there were many people and companies that did not attend because the health regulations were still in flux at that time. They were changing almost weekly, and new science was in the news every day. Wear 2 masks, don't wear a mask, wear 1 mask. Between statements by Fauci and the CDC, it was hard to tell facts from educated guesses, and that was enough to keep many people away, and I can't say that I blame them. But here we are, almost exactly 1 year later, with Ford, Honda, and GM pulling out, but not for any pandemic. Ford actually released a statement the other day, and it goes something like this. We are refining our approach to this annual SEMA show to better reach and highlight how customers can personalize their Ford vehicles today and tomorrow. Our new approach showcases our winning portfolio of cars, trucks, and SUVs, and the comprehensive catalog of Ford performance parts and accessories that customers can purchase online or from their local Ford dealer. Ford will still have a presence at SEMA, but instead of our traditional displays, we look forward to showcasing our winning portfolio of vehicles and select displays at the show and digitally online. We will share more details closer to SEMA. In other words, they're giving $1 cars out to a bunch of builders those builders are going to put them in their own booths. Perhaps Ford's $3.1 billion loss in the first quarter of 22, combined with the $5.4 billion loss on Ford's 12% stake in Rivian, gave them some pause. Now, there's no shame in that, but perhaps it's a sobering moment of reality for Ford when you have to remember that Ford made a profit of $3.3 billion in the same period last year. This doesn't mean that they're not coming back. In fact, SEMA has long made provisions for a manufacturer who needs to skip a year and making sure that they don't lose their display spot for the following year. I think that was the right thing to do for SEMA, and I think that's a great thing about SEMA. They listen to their people. But I have to wonder if the pandemic shutdown may have convinced some companies that the economics of having a display at SEMA just doesn't deliver sufficient measurable returns. Maybe they're starting to think that they can do without it. The SEMA show is a show that everyone needs to experience at least once. There's no show like it in the world. It's like the Super Bowl of the shows. But as the internal combustion engine is reaching the sunset of its existence, is it just a matter of time before the SEMA show becomes an accessory show and we see air fresheners and one of the plastic hubcaps for Teslas? Will following generations of car lovers live in a world without lumpy cams, the whine of a supercharger, or the wonderful sound of a blow-off valve on a turbo car? As regulations start to spell the demise of modifying cars and the world moves away from fossil fuels, we are probably looking at the twilight of the car hobby as we know it. SEMA is among the last lines of defense against the destruction of our hobby, and as consumers, we should appreciate and support them with every bone in our body. SEMA has done much good over the years. And while SEMA probably has nothing to worry about for some time, if you're an automotive aficionado, I strongly suggest that you try very hard to get to the SEMA show this year. That's it for me this time. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.